Welcome to the USC channel, USC Primetime Live here at the Voice of College Football. Again, the art, I apologize for this. We don't have the art up with the USC colors, but this is USC Primetime Live, the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football, our show presented by FanDuel. I'm Matt Zemek, along with Crashlet Collier, Nolan Ezett joining us shortly, most likely. Ethan Inman, hey, he has a new job. Lots of demands for the new job. We can all relate to that. So Ethan gets another Tuesday off so that he can focus on his new job. And we're all very happy for Ethan. It's something that he wanted. He told me privately before the start of the show, job's working out well. So yay, Ethan. Like we want that for everyone here. And it's great, that everyone on our team here at the USC channel, whenever we can make a show, it's great, but real life comes first. And we want to be sure of that. So we're proud of Ethan for how well it's going with his job. All right, folks. So the main story in and around USC football this week, last week was Sam Darnold's victory lap for the Super Bowl. The other US Seahawks, Leonard Williams, Uchenna Nwosu, Brandon Peely. But this week, main story, the more coaching staff additions. Chad Savage as passing game coordinator, AJ Howard as outside linebacker coach. And so, Crash, that's really the entry point for our conversation. We discussed in previous weeks that Eckler, being the linebacker coach, thought, okay, maybe Rob Ryan's going to be part of the linebacker coaching group, because usually there are different specific linebacker coaches, outside and inside linebackers. So maybe the thought was that Eckler was going to get all the linebackers, but no, there is going to be another specific linebacker coach, and that's AJ Howard. So, Crash, your reaction to the Howard-Eckler combination of position coaches in the linebacker room at USC?
Well, Matt, I think it's definitely an interesting move, especially promoting AJ Howard up to that position and make him a full-time on-field coach. And one thing I was starting to realize, especially as, trying to keep track of all this, trying to, read up on everything. So I'm, prepared obviously for when, we come on air every week, was I'm thinking, that's a dang lot of coaches USC is going to have. What turns out I realized was, thanks to Ryan Karchi at the LA Times, was that there's no longer a limit to how many coaches you can have on the field during a game who are allowed to coach the players. However, you are still capped at, I think it's 10, I believe, or 11 assistants plus the head coach who are allowed to recruit. So I think because that cap on coaches has been removed, I think it's really smart that USC's, going out and really, trying to enhance the staff in all these specific ways. And yes, well, I think, Eckler's, taking the coaching linebackers, but I think because of his duty coaching special teams, while obviously they haven't specifically delegated to him the inside linebackers, I think the fact that they're giving Howard the outside linebacker room, I think is really helpful, that it then allows, it takes a little bit off of Eckler's plate while still allowing him to oversee both the special teams and the entire linebacker room. So I really like it from that perspective, and that you're giving a coach who's, I think, got potential. We'll see how that goes. I mean, there is a case to be made that shouldn't you, if, you have the ability and no longer held by limits to, not be able to go out and get who you want. You're not constrained by any caps on, obviously, at least on-field coaches. But I still like it in that, you're giving an up-and-coming coach the opportunity, like a shot at being an on-field coach while also having someone overseeing that entire room, while also, having, to dedicate time to the special team. So I'm actually kind of a fan of it.
Yeah, I think you make the essential point that Eckler taking on special teams and all the linebackers, that probably would have been too much on his plate. So it really makes very logical sense that Eckler gets a piece of the linebacker room, not the whole linebacker room, so that he can indeed focus on special teams. And, I'm just, my thought about Eckler specifically, this is less about AJ Howard. I think you got to the heart of the story, Crash. It's about not putting too much on Eckler's plate. It's so important for USC's return game, USC's kick return game, also kick coverage as well. Notre Dame got a big kick return for a touchdown in that game in South Bend. Like USC, USC recruits elite athletes. USC has an elite recruiting class coming in. Like USC should be the team that has the 95-yard kickoff return. USC should be the team, the program that's absolutely feasting, because like special teams, that's where athletes shine, right? That's where dynamic, aggressive, go-getter types flourish. USC should be winning in that element of football, and it hasn't. And it's been just the opposite. USC's been allowing the big play instead of making the big play on special teams. So, like, you just have to be value added in that area, and that has not been the case under Lincoln Riley at USC. I mean, Sayeri's great work as a kicker, that was a plus. That was certainly a huge upgrade from Dennis Lynch and what Lincoln Riley previously had. But the kick coverage and kick returns have just been well below par. So, like, I want Eckler to be making maximum impact on special teams. And that, to me, is, like, I agree with you, that is the main story of the A.J. Howard promotion, and now having that particular piece of the puzzle set for USC. So the other main story, Crash, Chad Savage, passing game coordinator. It's another voice in the room. And of course, this is the offensive side of the ball. So Lincoln Riley, is manning this ship. But anything to read into this, anything that you think is especially noteworthy about Chad Savage and his role in the USC passing game for Jaden Mayava in 2026?
Well, I think just elevating Chad Savage is really smart. I've been high on this hire from the start, especially, obviously, you look at him both as a recruiter and a coach. Obviously, what he did at Colorado State with their recruiting, you can obviously kind of see that, CSU, even losing him, kind of ultimately, I think in part led to, Jay Norvell's downfall and ultimately firing there. So you can see the impact he had in his relations. And especially it was smart with just in keeping with just, and I know he was obviously here before, Chad Bowden, if I have that correct, Chad, or whenever he got here. I don't know why I'm blanking on that now, but just you can see even just when he's paired with Chad Bowden, the general manager, you can just see just how they're just Bowden's whole strategy of, putting a fence around Southern California combined with Savage's relationships already well established from his CSU days in Southern California just have really, I think, had a really good impact. And then obviously I've really liked what he's done, just obviously being the inside receivers and tight ends and coaching inside receivers and tight ends, especially with how he just worked that room so well. Really, obviously, Mekhi Lemon, well, obviously, Lemon was just wide receiver, but still just obviously work in the receiver room in general, as well as just especially the tight ends with both Lake McCree and Walker Lyons. Not only did both those guys get their day, but also managed, really keep them, obviously, for the most part, I think, happy and obviously, still supporting each other. Like no one was more excited for the other than the other tight end. So really, I like that. And I like that he's now getting to oversee this entire offense. And to answer your question about Jaden Mayava, I think it's great because it gives Mayava just another voice in his head, voice that's, really smart, knowledgeable, knows the game, and I think is going to be able to really help elevate his game, especially, which I think will be more critical because Mayava does not have Mekhi Lemon or Jacoby Lane. So I think just having someone who's much more really super knowledgeable from the receiver perspective being elevated to the passing game coordinator is going to be super beneficial to Jaden Mayava, in my opinion.
And we welcome aboard Nolan Ezett to our show here at the Voice of College Football, USC Primetime Live. And so Nolan, Crash and I have been talking about the new staff additions. Like that's the main theme. That's the top story for this week's show. So you give your input first on Chad Savage and the promotion to passing game coordinator, and then circle around to the topic that Crash and I did at the very top, which was A.J. Howard moving up to outside linebacker coach to give Mike Eckler a little bit of help in that linebacker room. So first, Chad Savage, and then A.J. Howard.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have expectations, honestly, for all of these coach. I think Chad Savage when it comes to USC's defense as a whole, and I'm going to sound repetitive at this point because I kind of say the same thing about USC's defense every single week. There's always a flaw within at least one or two of the units, whether you want to break it down by safeties, cornerbacks, defensive line, linebackers. Every year, there's a couple of units that have their weakness. What I'm excited for, though, is the amount of change that this coaching staff is undergoing. I can't remember a time other than the first year that Alex Grinch was gone that USC has undergone all this change. I think USC has largely reached its floor with how its defensive unit is kind of acting. So because of that, with Savage, I don't think the unit can get much worse than we've seen it the last 2 years, especially last year, I would say, or this most recent season. I'm not going to call myself an expert on Savage's game and his coaching style, anything like that. But I do think just having a new face in charge of this unit is going to be is going to at least provide more. It'll provide hope to this unit, I think, if anything, because we've seen the level of dysfunction that this unit has had the last couple of years. Remind me what the second part of your question was.
AJ Howard being promoted to outside linebacker coach.
Yeah, I would also say the same thing. Although when it comes to these promotions, again, having a new face in charge of the unit, yes, very strong. But again, kind of sounding like a broken clock here. But if a unit wasn't working that well last year, how much do you want to keep these guys around? It is true that having a new face in charge of a linebacker unit, defensive line unit, safeties, cornerbacks, yes, change is good, of course. Was that the best candidate for the job? That's the question. Yes, it's good to keep the same guy around so you don't have to train someone new. But USC isn't known to have the best defense. I'd say on the offensive unit, promoting coaches within, absolutely the right move. If you want to take a wide receivers coach and give them more responsibility, well, USC seems to have productive wide receivers every year. Why not do that? Little bit more of a question mark with the defensive unit, but again, I don't think it gets much worse than last year. So I have no true complaints heading into this season.
Only thing I'd add to any of that is with the Chad Savage piece of this. I've already remarked about AJ Howard, just taking something off Mike Eckler's plate, which I think is necessary again, so that Eckler can nail it on special teams, which USC absolutely needs. But with Chad Savage, my thought here is if this means he's doing a certain amount of things, and I don't know what the exact delegation of roles and responsibilities is, but if he's taking anything off Dennis Simmons' plate, that's good. I'm liking that because I've gone on record. I'm the Dennis Simmons skeptic in the crowd because, elite dudes, WR1, WR2. Yeah, he's developed those, but wide receiver depth has suffered. It has not been up to the 2022 standard when you had Kyle Ford and Taj Washington and Brendan Rice behind Jordan Addison and Mario Williams. Like that, USC had 5 legitimate threats at wide receiver in year one. And Dennis Simmons has not cultivated depth consistently in the intervening subsequent years. When Deuce Robinson left, Zachariah Branch leaves the program and does great at Georgia. Like Dennis Simmons is not meeting the expected standard. So if there's anything Chad Savage is going to do, and I don't know exactly how the pie of responsibilities and roles is delegated by Lincoln Riley. I'm not making any claims to that. I'm just saying if this means Dennis Simmons has a lesser profile and overall reach of roles and responsibilities, I think that's a good thing for USC. More broadly, before we tackle other topics tonight here at the Voice of College Football, USC Primetime Live, presented by FanDuel here at the Voice of College Football. Just more broadly, because USC is promoting some staffers from within, and Nolan, like you've expressed a certain degree of skepticism, and I would say appropriately so, right? Like the results have not been spectacular, so why are you promoting from within? But does this larger picture of promoting certain guys from within at these smaller position coaching spots does it reinforce the notion of, hey, the program's really pushing all its chips into the middle of the table, partly with Gary Patterson, but mostly with Trumaine Carroll? Like, the belief is if Trumaine Carroll absolutely nails it with the strength training, the rest is going to largely take care of itself. And you have Gary Patterson as the X and O mastermind to put guys into the right positions. It just seems as though all of this is a reflection of trust in one, Trumaine Carroll, and then 1B, Gary Patterson. Nolan, how would you assess that line of thought?
You're not necessarily wrong, but I think two things can be true at once. Yes, everything you said might be true. At the end of the day, is that the right decision here? And again, that's where I think it goes back to, you should look at the unit that we're talking about. Use the wide receiver example again. Wide receivers always producing. Running back example. Running back, no matter who it is, it's someone new every year, it feels like, in this backfield. Sometimes there's going to be three guys at some point, like we had last season, but that unit always produces. And because of that, any coach that's involved in that system sounds like they're probably doing their work very, very well. I don't know how I feel about promoting defensive analysts even from within, unless, of course, Lincoln Riley or anyone else on this team just individualizes someone and says, hey, that's the guy that could be the future of this team. I don't doubt that there are those guys that are a part of that unit, but in general, the defense hasn't been great. I'm still more of a fan of promoting from within on the offensive unit. And that doesn't negate what you said. I think two things can be true at once.
So I think obviously I want to add, obviously, Matt, you mentioned Trumaine Carroll. I'd also like to add they hired Ray Thomas away from Kansas City State to basically be the assistant director, strength and conditioning coach, or director of sports performance and director of speed development. So I think that kind of goes to your point that you're saying about Trumaine Carroll. Are they going all in on just, the strength and conditioning piece? Which I think there's certainly a case to be made. And is that where USC really felt that it was best to allocate their resources? And I'm not saying that, obviously, I've got my skepticism about, promoting, a bit from within, especially, with how the defense has went this year. But I think maybe there was something I'd think about now, like with Lincoln Riley wanting to try to keep as much of his defensive staff together and not have to, go out and try to, sign a bunch of, new guys to try to just keep what he could, not so much because of like the quality of coach or their potential, but I think he's wondering, all right, if we can get the right dudes in the room and get them developed right. Trumaine Carroll, he's got a full off season now. He's not just coming in right before summer, as well as we hire the guy who he worked under him at Kansas State to work under him again. I think we got a pretty good chance. I have to think at least might be going into the thinking of Lincoln Riley. So for that reason, I'm really thinking, could they have maybe done a little better? And then I think also Gary Patterson has publicly said that he's fine, I think, quote, blending in with the coaches who are already there. Obviously, he was not afraid, make the moves that he thought he needed to make, especially with, bringing out Paul Gonzalez over with him, who coached under him at TCU. So he wasn't afraid, he's like, all right, I need that guy. But I think he was also fine saying, all right, I can work with what we got here. But I think USC, I think more made the move to, work on the strength and conditioning, because that was clearly lacking. And now that you've got Trumaine Carroll here and you're putting resources behind him, I think USC is kind of betting that that's where their resources were best spent this offseason.
All right, plenty more on USC football in this show, and specifically 2027 recruiting, like that's picking up a little bit. Very good chance that USC lands a 4-star wide receiver this coming Friday. Like that's been in the news. So like the recruiting machine created by Chad Bowden rolls on. We're going to be talking about that as the show moves forward. But this is USC Primetime Live here at the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel. So this is the FanDuel segment of the show. Always a FanDuel game or prop in the first half hour of the show every week. And that's part of our deal with FanDuel and the great support that FanDuel is providing throughout the network here at the Voice of College Football. So there's no football. Like the Super Bowl is done. That's run its course. And last week we did NFL futures for 2026 are like, we've maxed out on the football train. We've ridden that as far as it can go. So now we have to go to college basketball. And of course, we're going to keep it in the family though. USC, big one at Galen Center, 7 p.m. local time on Wednesday night, 10 p.m. in the East. The number 10 Illinois Fighting Illini come to Los Angeles, and you can see the odds. Illinois a 9.5-point favorite, but the plus 9.5 for USC juiced at minus 115. Now you get Illinois minus 105 if you're going with the Illini giving 9.5 points. Money line Illinois minus 550. USC with that fat plus 400 price. The over under no juice. It's both minus 110. The over and the under 153.5. So, gentlemen, your thoughts on first, just where you would lean from a betting perspective, but then, of course, it's USC men's basketball. USC squarely on the bubble, right near the cut line for the NCAA tournament. So, first the betting perspective, then the NCAA tournament bubble perspective. Let's start with Crash and then go to Nolan.
So, I'm honestly thinking this might be a little bit high, especially when you have to factor in. Obviously, Elijah Arenas has been playing phenomenal the last few games, and he's only been back, I think it's 7 or 8 games at this point, if I'm got that correct. So I think this spread's a little bit high. I think it can be a potentially really high-scoring game, especially when you consider it very much looks like USC should be getting Chad Baker-Mazara back tomorrow night in time for this game against the Illini. So I think it's going to be USC's going to cover, and I think it could be a very high-scoring game, especially with just especially with how USC's been playing, but also, you got to, factor in that Illinois is going to, they got to, keep up with Illinois. I think they got a good chance to do it, and especially, at home. They had a tough loss last week, and I think, this could be one that, I think is going to be closer than I think Vegas is that the odds are kind of saying. So I'm thinking I'm taking the over on the score, and then obviously, I think USC is going to cover this one, keep it pretty dang close. Wouldn't even be surprised if USC pulls off the upset even. And then as for just where USC sits, like I said, I think they're in a very precarious spot. Injuries have obviously been a huge factor this year. Obviously, Amarian Dickerson, Rodney Rice, both going down. Elijah Arenas, getting him back, though, is a plus. Chad Baker-Mazara being out the last couple of weeks certainly hurts. But obviously, I've been impressed with Cam Woods. I was initially a little skeptical of him, but after just how he's played in the last couple of weeks, I'm starting to come around to him. And I'm really just liking how this team is playing, just, seemingly just having that sort of next man up mentality, I think, as they've even said, and just, really overcoming the adversity. So I think USC is in a really precarious spot, but I think they got a shot to do it if they can, just stay healthy, obviously. But when someone does go down, someone does need to step up. That's definitely been missing a little bit in Baker-Mazara's absence, but I think it's something that if it's almost anyone else that USC can, I think, continue to compete, and I think has a really good, I think they can make it, but it's just, they got to win games. Obviously, they got some favorable big quad 1 games coming up, but they got to take full advantage of those.
Yeah, I mean, keeping up with Illinois is very difficult. I think they've got the second highest offensive rating this year. Very, very tough task. So I'm going to go with the over for sure as well. Combine that with, just how, I guess, USC's been playing. If you get CBM back, obviously that helps as well. And Arenas is just a walking 20+ point a game machine at this point. Very impressed with how he's been playing consistently. So I think the over is definitely the play for me. The spread is tough. I think Vegas, or I think FanDuel pretty much nailed it here with that one. What's interesting to me is the last couple of games for USC, all of them have been a game where they would have covered this 9.5 point spread. There's been a bunch of single digit games the last couple of weeks. I've got written down Northwestern, Wisconsin, Iowa, Rutgers, Indiana, Penn State, Ohio State. That's like 7 games in a row, I think, for USC, all within 9 points, whether it's a win or a loss. So USC playing their competition very well, but that competition's not Illinois. I think it was only one ranked opponent in there. So I don't know if I would bet the spread on here. If I would, I hate to say it, but I think I'd probably go with Illinois. And so for that reason, I'll wait off of that and just take the over, since I don't like betting against my Trojans. with regards to USC's, kind of pre-March analysis, USC right now sitting at 18 wins, not too far off of that 20 to 21 mark you kind of want to be to make sure you're on the right side of the bubble. And USC has a difficult schedule the next couple of weeks. Going to look to get some revenge on some other teams, Washington being one of them. But you've also got teams, Oregon, UCLA. You should be able to win some of those. I think USC will certainly make it in. I don't even know if they'll end up being a bubble team in the end. I think as long as they can secure 3 wins against some pretty decent opponents, they'll be pretty safely in it. But it is a tough schedule for the rest of the season. So a couple losses in a row, and the Trojans are in a tough spot. But I expect them to roughly split the next 6 games.
Yeah, I would not touch this spread. I think the spread's pretty well calibrated. And I think the over is definitely the play. So we're all in agreement on that. The over 153, definitely the best play. You could take USC plus the points and a standalone bet, a single, and you fold Illinois money line into a parlay. That's another thing you can do at FanDuel. As for USC on the bubble, one thing to note as people watch our show, UCLA is getting its doors blown off by Michigan State. That was like 77-50 last time I checked. So Mick Cronin, he's gonna, throw somebody under the bus after the game. That's coming.
Can't wait for it.
Popcorn, nom nom nom. So that's always fun. And USC and UCLA, they play each other twice down the stretch. So if one team can win 2 games, that's going to be huge. If they both split, then it goes to the other games. One thing that no one brought up, like USC has a tough schedule. And on one hand, that's bad. Like it's going to be hard to get enough wins to get in. But there's no game that if USC loses, it's going to tank the resume. Like Penn State was the game USC absolutely had to win, because if you lose, you're falling 2 seed lines. You're falling like 8 or 9 places on the overall seed list. So it was so essential that USC got that particular win. I would say if USC wins 4 more games, and that's including the Big Ten tournament as well, Trojans are probably in. Not a lock, but probably in. If they can find 4 wins on what's left of the schedule, probably in. If they get 5 wins, they're definitely in. 3 wins, it's going to be a long wait until Selection Sunday, and it would depend on which specific games the Trojans won. But let's also consider it's not just USC in isolation. It's also what else is happening on the bubble. So UCLA is struggling. Bad news for USC. Ohio State's beating Wisconsin. That's not a good result. USC did not want that to happen. But Virginia Tech, bubble team, lost to Miami. TCU, bubble team, lost to UCF. UCF was ahead of TCU on the seed list. So you want the team that's closer to the cut line to lose. So TCU losing to UCF, that is a plus for USC. So you got to be watching Big 12 ball, Big 10 ball, SEC, ACC, Mountain West as well. Like San Diego State's right on the bubble. New Mexico's right on the bubble. West Coast Conference, Santa Clara's right on the bubble. St. Mary's is probably in, but still needs to win a few more games to feel safe. So you want to be following all of those stories for USC getting into the men's NCAA tournament. And, Crash just mentioned the litany of injuries. If Eric Musselman can just get this team into the dance, it's a great coaching job and it's a great outcome for this team. If imagine Arenas being healthy a whole year, Rodney Rice being healthy the whole year, Baker Mazzara being healthy the whole year, Dickerson being healthy the whole year, that's a Sweet 16 team. If USC has all the horses healthy the whole way, that is a Sweet 16 caliber roster. So brutal injury luck for this team. Just getting into the tournament would be a magnificent result, would create a lot of momentum for the following season. All right, so that is our FanDuel odds segment of the week. Illinois minus 9.5 over USC, a big one on Wednesday night in the Galen Center. If get it and get a ticket. If you have nothing else to do, the NBA's off, Lakers, Clippers, they're not playing until the weekend because this is the post All-Star week. Los Angeles Kings aren't playing because it's the Winter Olympics, and the Dodgers are still a month and a half away. what else you gonna do? Where else you gonna go? Go to Galen, support this team, because this is a big one against the Fighting Illini. All right, so that's our FanDuel segment. Back to USC football, and so 2027 recruiting, the Chad Bowden lean mean recruiting machine. Gears are cranking up again. USC expected to land some big prospects in the coming days, including a 4-star receiver this upcoming Friday. Crash, and then Nolan, just, it looks like it's beginning to line up for another big recruiting class in 2027 at USC football.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I think obviously, this is kind of what we expected when, Chad Bowden was announced. Obviously, he got right to work, got that 2026 recruiting class really locked up. And like I said earlier in the show, like, he really just helped reestablish a lot of those relationships that were very broken. Obviously, I mean, well, I don't want to, say Lincoln Riley, was the one who caused that. Just kind of just the way I think just USC, even before Riley got there, was just, seemingly moving away from Southern California, which then led schools like Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State to move in. I think you saw that, there was just obviously a lot of just damage there, hard feelings. But I think Chad Bowden comes in just, obviously just the relationships he comes in and establishes, I think really just helps USC, really get back to its roots, just stay in its own backyard. Like, why go search for the talent when it's in your backyard? I'm not saying, obviously, if you know what, the best players in Florida, go get them. Like, I'm not saying don't go recruit the best dang player, but have your focus be on the guys in your backyard when you have the fertile recruiting ground in your own backyard. And I think Bowden coming in, I think just with the 2027 class, I think we can expect, obviously, potentially not their number one ranking, and if not that, certainly top 5, just with what he's been doing and everything. So I think really it's just obviously, shows obviously with what's likely to happen on Friday, I think is obviously just more evidence of the work that Bowden has done since he got here. And obviously you can tell that he's motivated, and especially with his public comments saying that USC fans should be unhappy with a 9-win season. Like, basically he's just saying, like, we got to get this job done. And like, that's kind of, I think, what I like about him is he's just like, he gets what the standard is, and that fans aren't going to be patient forever. And that, patience among the fan base, at least the way I can tell, is starting to wear very thin. And he wants to obviously correct that and change that now before it's too late.
Yeah, I think getting that four-star receiver, Quinton, who, I mean, it's USC is the favorite. And anything can happen though, so you got to keep the fingers crossed to get him. But he would be the best recruit so far for USC. USC has 3 recruits, just landed one, I think earlier today. But it's 2 3-stars, and then another guy who is a top 100 recruit. But I mean, Quinton is I think the 51st ranked player in the nation. So this would really start to propel a recruiting class that I don't want to call it's slow, but after the most recent recruiting class that ended number 1, the expectations, I think, were pretty high. And USC hasn't necessarily had that star that it's gotten yet for 2027. So this would be that. I will say, again, fingers crossed if USC is able to land Quinton and subsequently go after some other 4- and 5-star guys and really get another top 5 or 10 recruiting class, or hey, maybe even number 1 overall recruiting class. I will be very, very impressed. Not necessarily shocked at this point. After you get one number 1 overall recruiting class, the dominoes just kind of start to fall over at that point. But say what you want about USC consistently getting 8 and 9 win seasons, but if you can follow that up with a recruiting class like USC had like USC has for 2026, and then you can do it again for 2027, that makes me a lot more confident in this team. No matter how long it does take this team to finally get to that next level, at some point you keep building up these building blocks. I mean, something's got to happen at some point, right? You keep getting these top recruiting classes. You're going to have a championship team at some point. And then it just comes down to recruiting, which is a whole nother conversation that we have every week.
All right. Glad to have some questions from the chat to help us along during this, lull in the middle of February here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. USC Primetime Live presented by FanDuel. Trojan Fight. Why is USC so far behind other schools for Marcus Fakatu? Cassie Curry seems a problem to not even be in the picture for local guys. Crash, Nolan, any thoughts on that particular line of thought?
Well, I think obviously, I think Archer Quick is saying that Fakato is like in Alaska, so obviously he's not quite in the backyard of USC, in the SoCal backyard. He's not obviously there, but still, it's not to say he's not important. But I think just I think it just comes down to just kind of I guess maybe it's just the national recruiting strategy Lincoln Riley originally tried to implement before Chad Bowden arrived, where I think just not that it was inherently a bad strategy. And like I said a few minutes ago, if you find the best guy in a place like Florida, Texas, go get him. Like, I'm not saying that, but if you're dedicating so much energy, there's only so much you can do in terms of covering ground. So if you're dedicating so much time, it doesn't allow you to really establish the relationships, at least the way I see it. But then if, obviously you have most of your time, energy focused in one area, and then you dedicate time like, all right, that guy's there, that guy's there, that guy's there. All right, we'll dedicate time exclusively to these guys with like the rest of our resources, then maybe you have it. I mean, that's just at least the way I see it, just with how USC strategy was when Riley first got here and how it has changed to, kind of how it was during the Pete Carroll days, where it was all about the SoCal guys like Mater Day, John Bosco, and then obviously, focused on where you found like those top prospects or recruits elsewhere around the country, but then had the primary focus there. So I think it's just about the strategy and just not maybe missing kind of potential guys just in general, at least the way I see it.
To me, Lincoln Riley's recruiting strategy nationally has changed quite a bit. I feel like since he first got here. I mean, his first season, it was all transfer portal, right? Everyone was taken from the transfer portal, whether it's Caleb, Addison, it was all out of the transfer portal. And then once at some point Lincoln realized, hey, you can't just rely on the portal. And he really started pouring all this effort into recruiting. At some point, I kind of remember not knowing exactly what his strategy was. And then he started really going into the Deep South and pulling guys from Georgia. And I was really excited because what were the best schools the last 10-ish years for college football? It's all those Southern SEC teams. And now we're starting to see that change, and we're also starting to see Lincoln Riley's strategy change. He's starting to invest more in recruiting, again, Mater Day and other Southern California schools, and also just California in general and West Coast in general. And I think the fact that Oregon has had a couple more successful seasons than USC, every year it scares me a little more that Oregon is going to take over recruiting. But because Oregon didn't win the Natty this year, and because Oregon ultimately didn't get it done, seems like for whatever reason, just Lincoln Riley has this bit of magic that he gets USC that Oregon doesn't quite have. And any local guys, I think USC just needs to invest more and more and more to get back to pulling quite literally every top recruit from Mater Day or anyone on the West Coast. To me, that's just easily the most accessible of all of the top recruits. I think USC's got to invest more in the West Coast.
All right. So a Hoosier here, Jim, saying, I'm not as enthralled with top recruiting classes. A quality coaching staff of good veteran players seem to work as good as any formula. So Nolan, not to say that you're wrong, because Crash, you've mentioned it too. Like, Lincoln Riley's been sitting on this talent gold mine in Southern California. You have to maximize it. You have to use it. So I'm agreeing with both of you in that regard. But year one at USC was the most successful Lincoln Riley season because the portal hit. Like, he was hitting jackpots with the portal in year one. Travis Dye, Jordan Addison, Bobby Haskins, the tackle from Virginia, not to be overlooked. Like, he was huge. Like, and of course, Caleb Williams, the ultimate transfer portal carryover for Lincoln Riley. So, nailing the portal. I think the debate between recruiting local talent and using the portal, to me, it's like a false debate. It's you nail your portal evaluations. Like Cignetti, his James Madison guys, Mendoza, like he nails it. It's not that he uses the portal, it's that he's nailing it. And he's getting great, ready to play, polished players. And now he's doing more recruiting, but it's been mostly nailing the portal with his evaluations, with the players that he picks to bring with him. When Lincoln Riley and his staff did that in year one, all those elite, fully formed players, emphasis on fully formed, like you didn't have to start from square one with Travis Dye, Jordan Addison, Caleb Williams, Bobby Haskins. Those guys were ready to play. They were ready to perform at an elite level. USC's subsequent portal hauls have not been nearly as good as that first year. It's not an accident that year one was Lincoln Riley's best season. So, it's not as though USC shouldn't be investing in modern day, because Lincoln Riley, obviously, he couldn't do it himself. He needed Chad Bowden to come in, provide the infrastructure, provide the NIL incentives to land these guys from the local high schools. Like Chad Bowden's retail political skills, a million times better than Lincoln Riley. You just wish that USC had made this move a year earlier, and the program wouldn't be as behind schedule as it currently is. But the Cignetti example shows how you can instantly become relevant and it's not so much using the portal, it's nailing your portal evaluations. So let's compare and contrast year one with subsequent portal seasons. A Jarrett Kingston. There was the offensive lineman from Florida who had to retire from football for health reasons. That's part of an evaluation, right? USC brought in a guy from Florida who then couldn't play. That's an evaluation miss. You should have known the guy's a health risk. Why are you bringing him into the program? So there were so many swings and misses in the portal in 2023 in terms of, guys brought in who didn't pan out. Dorian Singer was a bust. Again, Dennis Simmons alert. Other portal acquisitions did not pan out. And so, when Dorian Singer doesn't become Jordan Addison 2.0, sets the whole operation back, doesn't give the offense the same level of punch, the same level of potency it had in year one. And then, of course, portal misses. Derek Harmon, losing Derek Harmon to Oregon, and Harmon became a stud for a 13-0 team that won the Big Ten, that played in the Rose Bowl. So not only bad portal evaluations, but then swinging and missing on certain premium high-end portal prospects. Like when I did my show with a previous co-host, Tim Prangley, love you, Tim. We talked a lot about Derek Harmon in that off season, and when Oregon got him, it really, really stung. So all to say that the investment in Southern California and making sure you lock down modern day, you lock down Bosco, and you lock down these fertile sources of talent, it shouldn't necessarily get into a framework where you're choosing A or B. It needs to be the right blend of both, and USC has not been getting that balance in recent years. So Nolan, Crash, when you consider the Cignetti model that Jim has talked about, but then you also recognize the absolute need for USC to lock down local prospects, something that Lincoln Riley clearly failed to do before Chad Bowden came along. Is there something you've learned or something you've kind of picked up in terms of that balance, portaling, recruiting, what's kind of the winning recipe, and how you've kind of readjusted your thought process on that? Nolan first, Crash second.
Well, Cignetti's team obviously won the Natty, so best team last year. And I think of every Lincoln Riley team that he's had at USC, it was that transfer portal heavy team, right? The 2022 team that was the best, both in terms of record, but also just when you watch them play, that was the best team. They would have made it in a 12-team playoff. But I think what's similar about both teams is, yes, they went very, very transfer portal heavy, because everyone knows someone out of the transfer portal is going to make a stronger impact day one than a freshman who might be number one overall in the country, but freshman at the end of the day, 18 years old, going to be outsized by everyone else on the field. The problem is that team that Lincoln assembled at USC largely had a success because of Caleb Williams, who was his quarterback at Oklahoma. And you could say the same thing about Cignetti for a lot of his pieces that he pulled over. Those were their former players. And I think the problem that we get into, not saying don't utilize the transfer portal at all, but I think the problem is that there's maybe 10, 15 really, really quality players in the portal every year. And you've got to compete with Ohio State, now Indiana, Oregon, Georgia, Texas A&M, Miami, fill in, a couple other really, really strong schools. Everyone's lucky to kind of get one. Whereas just normal recruiting out of high school, there's 100 players in the top 100, and all of them should make a strong impact if they have a strong work ethic and are a good fit. So I'm not saying don't invest in the transfer portal at all, but I think when Lincoln Riley brought over Caleb Williams, the only reason he had access to Caleb Williams was because he was his coach. And when Cignetti got all those guys from JMU, the reason he got all those guys was because he was their coach. And so I think expecting Lincoln Riley to have as good of a transfer portal class as he did in 2022 is a very, very high expectation. I could make the argument that USC's 2022 class from the transfer portal and Cignetti's class last year were the two best transfer portal classes ever. Like, you could absolutely make that argument. And the common denominator there is, well, they were their coaches. So you can't expect Lincoln Riley to pull anyone else from Oklahoma, because at this point, everyone he coached, they're already gone. So to me, yes, you got to have a fair balance, but you've got to be investing where there's a large sum of really highly talented players. And that's recruiting out of high school.
I've started to come around to, like, obviously I'm not saying that recruiting at the high school level isn't unimportant, because it's still absolutely very vital, I think. But I'm just wondering, I've kind of looked at it more. It's like, I feel like my best way I've been thinking about it as you were posing the question, Matt, was recruiting versus the transfer portal. It's like an investment. I think if you go for the recruiting, obviously it's you generally know what you're going to get out of players, at least kind of out first. It's going to be a little slower, but in general, you can know what to expect. Like, it's a lot easier to, make your evaluations. But with the transfer portal, if you don't, it's so much riskier. It is a much riskier investment, but if it hits, you get a much higher return on it. And obviously, if, you have the knowledge, as in you're at a previous place, you can then, utilize that knowledge to nail your evaluations, which I think both Riley and Cignetti both did. But if you miss on your evaluations, especially when you go very transfer portal heavy, and the team I've used a lot to example this is Colorado, who just, now that they've lost Shador Sanders, and Travis Hunter too, and there's another one right there, hello, Deion Sanders, who had the knowledge of his players at Jackson State to bring them along with him to CU. I think it's kind of that same idea of, if you don't nail your evaluation, your portal evaluations, and that's a heavy amount of your team, it could blow up. Like, it blow up fast, obviously, as we saw with Colorado. So I think really you got to find that balance. But if you're trying to win and win now, which as we all three of us agree, Lincoln Riley needs to win now, you have to make it to you have to go more portal heavy, and you've got to make those riskier investments, because otherwise it's going to be an 8-4, 7-5 season. And I don't know how he survives one of those. He's got to at least get 9 wins and be, scratch, and at least got to be, trying to kick the door down of getting into the college football playoff next year if he wants to keep his job, at least the way I see it. So really, it's like, yeah, he's got to make those riskier takes on the portal guys versus going kind of the safer bet with the recruits. But if you don't go there, it could also blow up there. So really, it's how do you strike that balance of, going for what's the risk with the portal, and obviously you got to nail those valuations while also still, recruiting at a high level, and also, maintaining the relationships in Southern California that are also going to be critical.
All right. I'm just going to make a point, and then I'm going to come at you with a follow-up question. But the point is that, in terms of what we've been talking about with Signetti and the portal, all these kinds of tension points that USC had to invest at an elite level to get this number one recruiting class. And it occurs to me that if USC pulled just some of the investments away from recruiting and put a few more investments into the transfer portal to get like a premium defensive tackle, to get a premium defensive end, so maybe the value or worth of a number one recruiting class isn't all it's cooked up to be. And it's the points being made in the chat by Trojan Fight. Let me just pop this one up. The biggest thing is not losing the talent in the portal. Getting a top class is less of a factor if half of them enter the portal after year one. So, is it worth? I mean, it's not bad to have a number one ranked recruiting class, but if you have a number 5 or number 6 recruiting class, but you're getting a few more premium pieces in the portal, a la Signetti, guys ready to play, whereas your recruiting class is freshmen and they got, you can't expect them to be immediate factors across the board, that maybe there's a better cost benefit for being like a number 5, number 6 in recruiting, but you get a few more pieces in the portal. That might be more of kind of the balance and the trade-off that a top program is willing to make, should be willing to make. So now I'm going to come at you guys with this point. What would you think would be a satisfactory recruiting ranking for 2027? Because we've begun to look ahead to the 2027 cycle. Again, USC could get a top 51 prospect, as Nolan referred to later this week. Is it important for USC to be number 1? Is it important for USC to be in top 5? Is it important for USC to be top 10? Mindful of this point where you do want to have a highly ranked recruiting class, but it's win now, and there's probably going to be some portal attrition. There's bound to be some portal attrition every year, not just 2027, any year, any cycle. And you want to be sure that you have enough in your war chest to get those premium pieces in the transfer portal. What should be the expectation for USC's recruiting ranking in the 2027 cycle? What is your general outlook? Start with Nolan, then go to Crash.
Well, I think first of all, for Lincoln Riley's sake, every year that he gets a number 1 or even I'd say top 3 or 5 recruiting class, I think he just buys himself another year at this rate. I think he goes 8-4. Fans are upset. Oh, number 1 recruiting class. Well, let's keep him another year. So for Lincoln Riley's sake, very important to get a number 1 overall recruiting class. But for the team's sake, I mean, this is a year.
And let me just interrupt. There shouldn't be a clash between what's good for Lincoln Riley and what's good for the program.
Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. And there wouldn't be a clash if Lincoln Riley had more success at this school, right? Because Lincoln Riley knows, hey, if Lincoln Riley knows that USC, whatever, doesn't have the future quarterback, he can take these next 2 years to build up a strong recruiting class. When he knows that USC is on the brink of winning, that's when he goes for the transfer portal, finds the missing pieces. But alas, here we are. Lincoln Riley has not even made the college football playoff. So yes, the goals of both Lincoln Riley and USC aren't quite the same. In terms of USC, though, for success, this is absolutely a year where the Trojans have to get something from the transfer portal. Their transfers have to pan out. And then we're going to probably have the same conversation next year where USC needs to go out and get some strong transfers. Because I think I disagree with Crash, what you were saying. I think transfers are way safer. I think you absolutely know what you're getting out of them. But the problem is you can't build a foundation of a program on transfers, because if they're in and out every year, right, you get your guy, you get your Mendoza, then he's gone next year. Now you got to do the same thing over again. And do you really want to go through that every year? I'm not sure.
If you're winning national championships once every few years, yes.
But I think what's more stable is building a strong foundation every year from high school recruits, and then every year you look and you say, hey, well, we've got our quarterback, we've got our receivers, we've got our line on both sides of the ball, and we've got our safeties, but we don't have a good number one cornerback, we don't have a star running back, and we need a left outside linebacker. Let's go look in the transfer portal to see who's ready to start right now. I think that's the way to go.
I'm not disagreeing, Nolan, but I do just want to say, if you don't play guys soon enough, if they come out of high school, guys only going to wait so long before they're like, screw this, I got a chance to play here. And then they hit the portal, and then you're hitting the portal anyways to replace them. So I'm not disagreeing with your logic. I think the recruiting method is much more stable, but unfortunately, just not just football and not just everything, but just everything college athletics, it is anything but stable right now in every facet of the sport. If some aspect of college falls under, even in a partial capacity, under the NCAA, it is guaranteed to be unstable to a very large extent. So I'm just saying, I'm not disagreeing with the logic of much more stable to build a program that way, but guys are only going to wait so long before they're like, I need to play. And obviously, I mean, we saw with Hassan Longstreet, obviously he's going to sit another year behind Sam Levitt at LSU, but the way it's just, things go down. It's just a lot of, as Archer is quick as pointing out, yeah, a lot of recruited quarterbacks have transferred out. I mean, USC hopefully should be able on to Jonas Williams, given that Jade Mayava will exhaust his eligibility, unless, of course, he finds some way to, sue the NCAA, which I would say is definitely non-zero. I don't see it happening, but can't rule it out. But USC should hold on to Jonas Williams. But at the same time, I think it's like you just see like guys as soon as they sense like, okay, like this isn't working, I'm not playing, whatever, we're not winning, whatever my reason is, I am gone. So you could just wind up hitting the portal anyway. So if that's the case, aren't you better off just kind of trying to mine the portal and just, really try to utilize that to get the best roster and just kind of have that win now, especially if it is leading to a national championship every year or so.
Really, really good insights in the chat. Trojan Fight, like I highlighted these before, but I'm going to just highlight them again. So Trojan Fight, it's tough balance. You hit the portal too much, recruits are going to say, "What, why am I staying around?" So like that's kind of the, leaning toward the building through recruiting. But then Jim comes in and says, "I think foundation building is gone. It's a year-to-year process." Like I think there's a lot of truth on both sides. So like we don't have to say it's all one, it's all the other. It's striking that balance. I think all three of us agree on that. Where we put down our markers, where we think, is the best way to proceed is a little bit different among the three of us. But another area where we'd all agree is, if USC had Chad Bowden in 2023 to get the recruiting piece and the Southern California talent piece locked down early, then USC would have built a foundation in year 2 and year 3. USC wasn't building that foundation in year 2 and year 3. You're now doing it in year 5 behind schedule, and the fans rightly want to win now, which is the portal approach. But like USC's recruiting has just been behind, so that had to get current, that had to catch up with the time. So like it's just everything at USC football. The three of us would all agree it's just been 2 years behind schedule after year 1. Which had the amazing portal class, and just not getting the house in order in 2023. And also, of course, retaining Alex Grinch, just a disastrous long-term negative domino effect for USC football. Like we're still paying the price for lack of administrative oversight, the lack of, accountability. Also, of course, Mike Bone leaving, which, that's his own fault. Like that happened to him. He brought it upon himself, I should say. All that instability from 2023 catching up with USC. It's why just everything's not quite in alignment. And here we are in year 5 trying to play catch up. That's just the reality, that we're still paying for the sins and missteps of 2023. All right, we were going to talk about the possibility of the Big Ten continuing to push the 24-team college football playoff with eliminating conference championship games. We'll save that for next week because, again, it's the off season. It's February, and we went about 30 minutes with the recruiting part of our conversation. So we're definitely going to get into the 2014 playoff next week. But that's our show for this week. So we'll see you next Tuesday, 10 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in Los Angeles, and the rest of the West. Thanks for watching and listening. Be sure to subscribe, like the show on YouTube, tell your friends about it. A reminder, vocfb.com/shop. Ethan's always wearing the USC camo cap. You buy one of those, it supports the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. And then, of course, the USC channel. You click on the join button on the YouTube homepage, USC, the Voice of College Football. You join at the middle Heisman tier, the top national champion tier. You get access to bonus segments that we've been putting out over the past several months. So for Nolan Ezett and Crashlet Collier and Ethan Inman, and again, Ethan at his new job, so not able to join the show, but hopefully he'll be back soon. This is Matt Zenek. Thanks for watching and listening to the latest episode of USC Primetime Live here at the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel. We'll see you next week.